If you want to write a novel and are having trouble writing a novel, then the solution might be to stop wanting to write a novel. Or rather, change the way you think about wanting to write a novel. A lot of people, myself included, get fixated on what they want to do and the reasons they want to do it, but they don't spend a lot of time thinking about where the desires themselves are coming from. When doing the hard work of writing comes up, our brain often presents us with many other easy, more enjoyable alternatives. Even when you manage to get in front of your project, some days it's a struggle. You have to fight against the urges that are pulling you in the opposite direction. I have struggled with this, as I'm sure a lot of you watching have, and it's something I've been exploring in more detail lately. What I've learned is that if you want to write a novel, removing the desire itself, along with all of the other desires, is actually what you want to do. Sort of. I'll explain. Speaking of me explaining things and you wanting things, if you want to see me explain more things, consider subscribing to my channel, as it's basically me explaining things, if that's what you want. Oh my god, I'm using a different mug. So let's break this whole wanting thing down. So this here is you. Most of my audience is actually stick people. Well, it's stick people and sea turtles, but I can only draw stick people, so. So this is you, and you have stuff that you want to do. You have desires, things you feel like doing. So you might feel like writing a novel. That's over here. But you also have the desire to do other things, like watch TV, or take a nap, or eat cookies, or eat small crustaceans if you're part of my sea turtle audience. And what happens is there's kind of a fight between these two desires. We have the desire to write over here, and then we have the desire to do all of this other stuff over here. And these other things don't have to be things like entertainment. It could just be a different novel that you want to work on. A lot of people struggle with this like shiny object syndrome where your mind is constantly coming up with new ideas that you could pursue. So this is not necessarily entertainment or stuff other than writing, but it kind of pulls you away from this other desire over here. What typically happens with most people is depending on which of these desires is stronger, that's the direction you get pulled in. So if today you feel more strongly like writing, then that's what you do because that's the strongest desire. If this other stuff has a stronger pull, then that's what you end up doing. This is where I think most people out in the world find themselves. Maybe not this audience because you guys are a little bit more serious about things, but I would say that most people wake up and generally just kind of run towards their different desires. Sure, there's stuff that they have to do that they don't want to do. You might not want to go to work or school, but you have to do it, so you do it. You might not want to take out the garbage, but you do it anyway. But all of the things that you're forced to do that you don't want to do are miserable to do. This is why you procrastinate or avoid doing the things that you don't want to do. Because for most people, if there isn't a desire for it, then it doesn't get done. This is what happens when most people embark on something like writing a novel. When they start out, this desire is really strong, but it very quickly fades and this other stuff comes up, so they stop working on the novel and just go back to all of these other things that they were doing before. This is why the first week of January every year, the gyms are full of people, and then a week later, most of those people are back at home on the couch. It's because the desire to do this new thing was stronger the first week of January, then it fades and it's replaced by another stronger desire. What you'll notice about this is that all of these desires, including the writing the novel desire, don't really come from you. They're in your mind, but they aren't really coming from you. A simple example of this, if let's say you're on a diet and you have the urge to eat a cookie, you'll notice that there's a part of you inside that's kind of fighting against that urge. It's not like you have the urge to eat a cookie and then you forget you're on a diet, and then after you finish eating it, you're like, oh my god, I was on a diet. I completely forgot. I shouldn't have eaten that. I'm sure that happens with some people, but usually even as you're eating the cookie, you're aware that doing this goes against your goals. Now, this is really difficult because our mind often creates a lot of justifications for doing these kinds of things. It'll tell you things like, you deserve to do this. We've been working hard all week. Or, it's just one cookie. It's not going to mess up the entire diet. Or, we'll be better tomorrow, but today let's have a cookie. We'll be serious today. We'll be serious tomorrow, but for today we're going to have a cookie. Or some small crustaceans if you're a sea turtle. It's the same kind of thing with procrastination. Your mind will give you all kinds of justifications. It will be easier to do it tomorrow. I'm tired today. We've already done blah, blah, blah today. We deserve a break. We often make procrastination about the thing that we're avoiding, but another way to look at it is that there's simply another thing, another desire that is stronger than the desire to do the thing that we know we need to do. What you need to realize is that there's a deeper part of you that goes beyond these sort of fleeting desires that pop into your mind. This is the stuff that you care about deep down. This is the stuff that you actually truly value. And if you look at it, or if you think about this, this is where your desire to write a novel actually comes from. Now, it's possible that your desire to write a novel does not come from a deeper place and it is just kind of a superficial whim that you have. But if it's something you've wanted for a long time, or if it's something that's very, very important to you, then chances are it's not just a fleeting whim that you've decided on that you're going to do this week. Now, what happens sometimes is these kind of fleeting desires sometimes align with our values. So if we value writing a novel, sometimes our mind is going to want to write a novel. We're going to have that kind of moment-to-moment motivation to do that. And when that happens, we feel good because it's very easy to act towards what we want to do because our mind also wants to do that thing. The conflict comes in, and what most people struggle with is when our desires don't align with this thing and pull us in another direction. And that's when we feel bad. That's when we feel guilt about not working towards what we value instead of just following what we desire. Another thing to understand is that there are so many people out there trying to force you towards this kind of stuff. Advertising is basically about making you want these kinds of things. And if you open up social media, you're going to be bombarded with a bunch of highly engineered content that's designed to make you want these kinds of things and pull you away from this kind of thing. The best writers in the world are not on the New York Times bestsellers list. They're writing ad copy to get you to buy cheeseburgers and pickup trucks and watch thousands of hours of TV. People understand that when you can influence people in this way, you can get things from them, and that's basically what advertising does. Now, the people that we tend to lionize, the really productive people who are out there writing novels and publishing novels and working towards their goals and working really hard, those people tend to have done one of two things. Either they got really, really lucky and they just happen to have desires that align with positive things that society tends to value. So they just happen to have a really strong desire to write all the time. Or the other possibility is that they've removed desire from the equation entirely and they're focused on being driven by what they actually value. Ultimately, this is about doing what you value doing versus what your mind wants to do at any given moment. It's this thing leading the show, which essentially means you're leading the show, versus all of this other stuff. This becomes difficult because fighting against these wants is really hard to do. But it becomes easy to do what you value when you don't have these desires pulling you in all these different directions. It's really easy to eat a salad every day if you never crave a cheeseburger. If that's the case, then your desire to eat a salad doesn't actually need to be that strong. Your choice of what you eat can be guided by your values rather than by what you want. A lot of people are trying to find motivation and they're trying to figure out how do I make this kind of want stronger when what you really need to be doing is making all of your wants less powerful so that you can be more in control. Now, you might be wondering, what's the difference between valuing something and wanting something? It's a really good question, and I think it comes down to a couple of different things. The first is that values are enduring. This is something that lasts for a long time. It doesn't come and go. If you want to write a novel, if you have an idea that you really want to see out in the world, that will stick around with you. It will continue to be there. It might be buried by all of this stuff, but it won't come and go like these other desires will. These wants come and go, but what you value is part of you intrinsically. Now, what you value might change through time, and I think a lot of this is just differentiating between what's an actual want and what's an actual value, but usually values stick with you. Another thing comes down to benefit. In life, there are things that we can do that we know will create a benefit in the long term. That's something like writing a novel. Writing a novel is not an instant gratification. You don't get a reward for writing right now, today, exactly in the moment. But all of this other stuff, like content consumption, nap, eating a cookie, all of that kind of stuff, there's an immediate gratification, but there's not really a long-term benefit. Another thing that you'll see with a lot of this stuff is like, if you eat a cheeseburger today, you will be happy in the moment, but tomorrow you'll probably want another cheeseburger. Wants kind of put you on this cycle of having a craving and then fulfilling that craving and then having a little short period of happiness and then having another craving and fulfilling it and blah, 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 and so on and so on. Values, when you're working towards something like improving your skill as a writer or even writing a novel, you don't have that cycle of craving and gratification. It's more of a enjoyable process. You're working towards a larger goal. There's not this craving, satisfaction of the craving, craving, satisfaction of the craving. So that's how you can tell the difference, but that can also be somewhat tricky. It can be tricky to know what you value versus just what your mind wants at any given moment. And another question you might have is, if I just stop wanting everything, then what is left to pursue? How will I know what to do if I stop having all of these urges to do different things? And I don't really know what the answer to that question is. I do think that if you ever get to that point, I don't think you'll just spend all your time sitting staring at the walls. I do think you will have a value, you will have goals, you will have things that are important to you, things that you will work to achieve, but they won't be driven by these wants. So how do you go about removing this stuff? How do you go beyond just wanting things? How do you take away the power that these things have over you? I'll start out by saying that I've not been able to do this yet. This is something I'm actively still working on, but there are a few things that have helped me on this path, and I think they'll help you too. The first thing is simply recognizing this separation. Recognizing that you are not the desire, that you are a separate being from that desire. It's like when you see a zebra, you're not the zebra. You're someone who sees a zebra. So when you have the desire to procrastinate on your novel, you are not the procrastination. You are someone who has the desire to procrastinate. You need to start looking at these wants as kind of sensory inputs. They're information that's being passed to you, just like looking at the zebra. The second thing is really just awareness. Noticing the wants that you have, noticing the desires that you have, watching them come and go, paying attention to what your mind tells you, what kind of justifications there are, and also thinking about, is this something that serves my long-term goals? And if I was to remove this desire, would I still move towards the desire? It doesn't sound like it would make a difference, but just being aware of these things can often weaken them. That's really all you need to do to start out, I think, is just recognize the separation and be aware of these things. What you get out of this process is that it makes things easier. And not easier in the sense that writing a novel will take 1 hour instead of 1,000 hours. It's still going to take 1,000 hours. It's still going to require the same amount of effort. but the difficulty of exerting that effort will be so much easier because you aren't distracted by and you aren't fighting against all of this other crap. Right now, if you sit down and write, you'll probably notice that you have these urges to go check your email or check social media or to go get a snack or go take a nap. You have all these doubts coming into your mind, all this stuff that just it takes up some of your mental horsepower and it makes it so much harder to do the work. I think the people who are really productive, the people who move towards a lot of their goals, actually find the process a little bit easier in the sense that they're not wasting a bunch of energy on just overcoming this stuff. When you get to that point, you no longer want to write a novel, you just write the novel. You take the action without regard to what your mind or all of these urges are telling you to do. You have a goal and you move towards it, and there's no fanfare, there's no resistance, there's no willpower, there's no finding motivation. You just go and do the thing. And so let me know what you think of this. I'm going to continue working on this myself. Maybe I'll provide an update at some point, but I'd love to know what you think about this in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.